we are
Yeah.
all here.
Yeah.
Yes. So after much technical difficulties, we are all here. Our new normal, web mistress, Elena, is on her way to Gen Con this week. So we're fumbling around. We're still going to do this show, though. And I'm so happy to be here. I'm Stefan Surratt. This is Rules as Written. You can find me on Twitter at DMBadWrongFun and, the normal discords for the DCC community as well. I'm there. We also have my co-host, Matt Robertson, aka Grape Ape.
How's it
Party
going,
games, but
everybody?
more importantly,
You can blame this train wreck on me. It is all my fault.
but by the power of working together, just like any good game, we have gotten it to work. And here with us tonight, we have two great men here, Jon Marr and Ben Marr, the Purple Sorcerer and I guess the Purple Apprentice.
It's fantastic to be here. So glad you got it working.
Can we call you the Purple Apprentice, Ben?
I don't know if you're like going, no, Dad, I look bad in purple.
Well, I'm wearing the black shirt and he's got the purple shirt, so.
Okay.
So we could probably skip our normal questions that we asked for the past episode, but I do have one question to start with. Jon, why is it Purple Sorcerer, not like Yellow Sorcerer or Green Sorcerer?
It actually went back as like when I first, I wrote Perils of the Sunken City, which was like, lucky enough, it was the very first third-party adventure that was published for DCC. But when I sent it into Joseph Goodman, and he's, I just wanted him to see it, because like I'd made the zero level party generator, and then I was like, I wanted something to test, and so I wrote this adventure. And I sent it to him, and he said, well, we have this thing to do, the third-party publishing. And, so I went and talked with my wife and, about all that would be required. One is I wanted to have a name that had, a color, so that when I created the website and did all the stuff, it had a specific color going with it. And actually, purple came from, did any of you play Stormbringer back in the day?
I have not.
It's like a cut down version of RuneQuest. It was really fun, set in the Elric world, Stormbringer, and all that stuff. And there was on the map, and it had this really wonderful map. On this map, there was like the Isle of Purple something, and it stuck in my head, and it's always stuck in my head. So when I had to come up with a color, we went with purple.
Cool. I've flipped through one module for that I found at my local used bookstore and was going, I didn't even know this was a thing for the Stormbringer RPG. That's very cool.
It was good. It was a good system because it was like a simplified, so it was kind of like a rules light version of RuneQuest. So it's cool. That's really
cool. Ben, and I know you're the new part of the creative tag team over at Purple Sorcerer. How's that?
It's been great. I mean, I've sort of been on the edges of the DCC community since my dad got into it. When he first heard about it, it was on a free RPG day at our local comic shop, and it was my mom and I went over to the store to pick it up. And ever since then, I've sort of been on the edges, and I've always wanted to get more involved in it, but just never got around to it. And then just recently, we decided, hey, why don't I try writing an adventure? So we're working on that now. It's been super great to work with my dad on that and start getting more into all of this.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it come out, seeing what's up with these Dread Specters.
Gosh,
he's got some. Ben had these really great ideas, and he's a really good writer. So it was kind of a no-brainer at this point to say, let's finally do it. So
yeah,
perfect. All right. Then. Well, we have started a half an hour late, so we are going to run a half an hour late just for you guys. I think we got the setup finally fixed. The sound may be horrible. That's more than I can handle right now. Stefan, you want to dive into our first question?
Absolutely. So tonight is all about thieves, and we'll see if we can bring out handout one, or question one, really. And that is, can a thief use their read language ability to read arcane writing? So, a quick survey without, we've got a little bit of, Matt's done some homework. He's got handouts. He's got supporting evidence. But my quick answer is yes, they can. but they're not going to be able to do it to the same level as someone who actually is an expert at this, like a wizard or an elf. John, what do you think?
Well, first is like the definition of like what is arcane writing, because it's nowhere mentioned in the DCC rulebook. So rules is written, it's not in there. I think all of us know from adventures and gaming and stuff like what we mean by that. And so like what I was thinking was that yes, they do have this heightened ability, but thieves also have the ability to read scrolls. And so it's almost like, well, which of the two would you use, or a combination of the two? Would you like say that if you make your roll, you get a bonus, like essentially on them, like essentially casting a scroll to be able to understand what the arcane message is?
So I think we can summarize that as a very much it depends, and it
It
depends on our
depends.
definitions.
Yeah.
Matt, how about you?
I was thinking the same thing. While I was researching, I went back and forth on it a couple different ways. And that's why there's so many handouts, because first I was like, well, yeah, I mean, they can read arcane writing, but then they have a specific ability for that. Read from scrolls, I would think would cover that. So I'm leaning toward no currently.
Okay. And Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I'm sort of leaning that same way of if a thief is trying to read arcane writing, that might come more from the cast spell from scroll. Just because that's more focused on the arcane side of things. When I think of read languages, it's more maybe the thief has experience with languages and sort of work stuff out. That's arcane writing is something different. It's not just interpreting a language. It's more mystical, right? It's more arcane.
That's true. We don't have wizard scroll whatever in the list of languages in the what Appendix L, I believe it is. But we got a little bit of evidence that we can look at. It's good to a good baseline is actually at Handout 1. If Matt, you can try to bring that up. But that is basically it's from page 36 in the core book, and it defines reading languages there a little bit, or at least the baseline role. And it says interpreting simple meaning requires a DC 10 check, and interpreting anything more detailed is DC 15. So we know from an arcane, any arcane writing, it's not gonna be simple. It's gonna be very detailed. But I think maybe, and I think you're very right, Ben, that this might be more of a read spell from scroll roll. They should probably use that instead of their read languages roll. But if we just want to, should we be adopting this DC 10 thing, or should we be going for a minimum of DC 12? Because that's the, for a level 1 spell, that's the minimum success value.
Well, so we defined read languages, and it says, simple as a DC 10. Let's look out Handout 1B real quick for the read from scroll. On page 36, and we are using the DCC RPG 8th printing, because that's the one most people have. It says cast from scroll. Provided a spell is written on a scroll, a thief can attempt to read the scroll and cast the magical spell. The spell check DC is as standard, but the thief rolls the indicated type of die to attempt to beat that DC. The thief may not attempt spell burn. So it has specific guidelines for reading magic.
Yeah.
If we look
So
at,
what do we
go ahead.
well, Matt is going to bring up another handout, but I think we all need to also think a little bit. What do we mean by arcane writing? Are we meaning like understanding a scroll and just being like, I picked up this scroll. It doesn't have a big label on it that just says Fireball. Can I glance at it and go, oh yeah, this is a scroll for Fireball? Or are we talking about
I think I've got
something
an
different? Are
answer
we
for
talking
you,
about
Stefan.
runes?
I think I've got an
Oh,
answer
okay.
to define that. So if we look out at Handout 1, whatever, I can't keep track of them. Page 152 of the Read Magic spell. The caster can read magical texts such as magical scrolls, books, tombs, as well as magical inscriptions on swords, arches, and the like. This allows comprehension but does not activate the spell. So that kind of defines what magical writing is for us.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I looked everywhere for that. I even looked at the spell but didn't see it.
We've got another one here for right magic that kind of will give another little definition. Page 236, right magic. The caster transcribes magical writings onto a scroll, which can be read at a later time to create a spell-like effect. The result of the spell check determines the level of spell the caster can transcribe, the number of spells that can be written, and if the caster can create any unique properties as part of the casting. Most spellcasters sign their scrolls, and they may attach curses or wards to prevent others from reading them. I thought that's why I wanted to include that, because that sentence right there. So we've got a little definition for magical writing. I would say, being based on those two definitions in the spells, that a thief cannot read languages and read their any magical or arcane script. What do you think, John?
Yeah, that's kind of like, what I was leaning toward, and I think when you actually read the descriptions of what read and write magic is, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah.
I think you've. I'm at very least now in the group of not with their read languages roll, but if they do a good cast, from scroll roll, then they can at least, if they could cast the spell, they would be able to read it.
I guess so. In your game, you would have to define if a writing is magical or not, right, Ben? And if you define that in your game as magical writing, if a thief comes up to it and they don't have a magic user, or the magic user rolls a 1 for their intelligence check, then I would have the thief roll cast from scroll to see if he could write it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that would make sense because obviously we're seeing here that the thief has some ability to read these magical writings, because if they can cast a scroll, obviously they can read what's on the scroll if they're casting it. I think the question comes down to, would that still be a reading the scroll kind of role, which is presumably going to be more difficult than just reading the language, because when you look at the read languages, it's interpreting basic meaning or interpreting more developed reading, whereas the casting from a scroll, if I am thinking correctly, is more of they're actually doing some sort of casting. It's going to be more difficult. So the question is, would you try to find some sort of middle ground between those, or just say no, you have to roll as though you're going to cast it and then just don't cast it?
Yeah, because does a thief need to understand what's written on the scroll to be able to cast it?
Right.
Or do they just recite the magic words and then it triggers the spell? I guess that's the question.
True. DCC has a lot of not of sorry to talk over you again, but I think it has a lot of that let's do away with the boring stuff and keep the exciting stuff. I know it like a con game. I hate it when the characters find a sweet looking sword, but they don't have a way of knowing what it is. I'm likely gonna at least give them a hint of what it is. Maybe just flat out tell them what it is. Same thing with the scroll, because it's I want these characters live and die in 4 hours. They stop existing after that, unless we're doing a legacy game. I want them to be able to use the toys they find.
Well, but that could be that the thief, you don't need full understanding for them to get the idea of what the spell or the magic writing is. Which I guess would be from a playing standpoint, that would be the important thing to say. If he's detecting and says, fire and death or something like that, in the writing, then that can drive the story forward, which is why that would be really helpful.
I do sort of have a question here. Looking at the description for cast spell from scroll, it says that the spell check, they do it as a spell check, and then if they can complete the spell check, then they can cast the spell. If you're just trying to read magical writing that isn't a scroll or a spell, there isn't necessarily a spell check associated with that writing. So the question is, would you just substitute their read languages skill, or would you need to bump that up to make it more difficult? How would you? I think the rules here are kind of fuzzy, and so the question is, if you were actually running a game, how would you do it to make it make sense, I guess?
Well, and we have a handout for that. Page 106 says spells cast by other classes. Foolish warriors have been known to read magical spells and dangerous attempts to wield magic. They can make an untrained attempt to cast it, They receive a 1d10 instead of the spell check, instead of a 1d20, and adding any modifier for like intelligence or maybe lucky birth sign. A trained thief may roll a higher die as shown on table 1-9. So they would definitely, I think, use their arcane read scroll ability to try to cast in the thief's case. The other thing to point out is Handout 1D. This is the read languages spell. So if a magic user casts, a wizard, casts read languages, the caster can understand non-magical words or images that would otherwise be unintelligible. So we have another definition between magical writing and non-magical writing. 12 to 13 is they can read a terrestrial language. 14 to 17 read and understand. 18 and 19 read, write, and understand. And then 20 to 23, that's when you get into terrestrial, supernatural, and extraplanar languages. 30, they can learn it permanently, and 32, they know all languages there are to know. So there's some precedence as how high the thief rolls, how big of a result they get. But I think the takeaway here is that judges should start putting arcane writing in there to try to goad thieves into reading it, because there's curses that can be on there. There's all kinds of ways to get those thieves into sticky situations.
If you want to add a curse to a scroll in your game, always corruption on a failure. Just they always get corruption.
Yeah, that can especially be fun with the thief, where even if they do manage to read it, even based on the read languages, they're only interpreting like simple meaning or slightly more complicated like meaning. They're not fully understanding what it is. It's not that they're suddenly becoming fluent in this language.
Exactly.
So if we say that they can read arcane writings, that doesn't mean they're going to understand everything about it, and they're almost certainly not going to understand any curses that are associated with it. At most, they might understand what the scroll is going to do.
All right, so let's bring our question up one more time. Can a thief use their read language ability to read arcane writing? I am going to say no. They would have to use their read from scrolls ability. They cannot use the read language ability. Stefan, what do you think?
I'm with you on that. They got to use their read from scrolls. I think I'll just tell them what the scroll is. Be like, you can look at this and like figure out it's an offensive fire-based spell. But I might not tell them if it's Flaming Hands or Scorching Ray or Fireball. They have to cast it to find that out.
All right, Ben, what is your opinion? What's your final answer?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's got to be the cast spell from scroll, because that's the only skill that the thieves have that really connects with that arcane writing, where read languages seems to be much more clearly normal languages.
And John, now we come to you.
And yeah, I agree that it would be like the casting from scrolls would be the correct choice to use.
All right, there you have it. Read languages cannot read arcane script.
Beautiful. Well, we'll hop on to question 2 then. And that one, I've been looking forward to this one. I did some scouring through modules trying to find examples. It is, when sneaking, does a thief have to make a move silently and a hide in shadows check, or just one? I see a smirky little smile on just about everyone's face, including my own. John, we ended with you on the last one. Why don't you begin this one?
I think it again, it's a situational thing. It's that if it if it is in a situation where you could be heard and seen, you would have to do both. If it's a situation where essentially the person has their back turned to you and you're just sneaking up on them, then it would just be the sound part of it. So I think it really depends on whether now, because like the rules they make it, I was really surprised because it's been a while since I've read these rules. The rules make it very, very clear that it's almost entirely up to the person, the thief doing the sneaking. That it says it's like the thief makes the roll against the standard difficulty levels, and the environment outside of very special circumstances doesn't. I mean, your opponent outside of very specific circumstances doesn't impact you. You're just making your roll. So I think it cuts down to that, like, if they could see you, then you're going to have to make the the sneaky one, and if they could hear you, then you'd have to make the, and so that's how I would interpret it.
Well put. I'm along the same lines with you. Ben, how about you?
I think when I first was looking at this, when I saw the question, initially my thought was it's just sneak silently, because hide in shadows, almost every example they give is hiding behind something, hiding in an alcove, hiding behind a box. That seems to be more hiding in one spot, where sneak silently is moving. The one thing that gave me pause is in the description for hide in shadows, where it mentions like a thief sneaking down a hallway, which shows that there can be movement associated with it. So I think I'm sort of on the same lines as John, that yeah, generally it's going to be sneak silently. If you're in a specific situation where you're trying to sneak in front of somebody, then you might have to use hide in shadows. But it seems like in most situations, it's mainly going to be sneak silently.
Matt, how about yourself?
So I think they have to choose one or the other. When they want to move, do they want to concentrate on being silent, or do they want to concentrate on not being seen? And the reason I say that is because they can only take one action per turn. They can only use one thief ability. So let's define those two real quick. As Ben already said, for hide in shadows, we'll bring that handout up one more time and read it to you. Hide in shadows on page 35. A successful hide check means the thief cannot be seen. As with sneaking silently, this check is never opposed and is often used before a backstab attempt. The thief can attempt to hide in broad daylight should they be so bold. The base DC for sneaking down a hallway with moderate success, chairs, bookcases, crevices is DC 10. Hiding at night in a shade. So I think it becomes what the thief wants to accomplish with their movement. Do you want to be quiet, or do you want to stay hidden from sight? If we define
I
sneak
agree.
silently, I'm sorry, Stefan. Page
Oh,
35, a thief
Go
never
ahead.
makes opposed checks to sneak silently. The check is never made against the target's attempt to listen. The thief rolls a hard DC, as noted below. Success means the thief did sneak silently. It goes on to say some more things. But yeah, I think they can kind of do both in that movement, but they can only pick one to focus on.
Definitely. And I want to also add there's some good examples in there in the specific rules for it. But I went looking through the modules to find examples of like where is this like actually written into the adventures, because I felt like that would be a really good example. And my favorite uh, one was in the heist, the DCCA 2020 Adventure Pack. That's where you can find that, because it has a example of sneak silently and hide shadows right next to each other. And for sneak silently, it just says, hey, in loud areas this, and quiet areas that. There's some bonuses. DC 13 to pass noiselessly. Pretty basic. But for the hide in shadows one, it defines, well lit locations -2 penalty, dimly lit. So it does a little bit more. I kept on looking I found a very interesting hide in shadows example in Bride of the Black Mans. Minor spoilers. There's a let's say a party, and it's there really shouldn't be a party going on in this Black Mans. But what it says here is a DC 10 hide in shadows check is sufficient to allow thieves to evade the reveler's notice. With a check of 30 or more, the judge may rule that the thief has sufficiently hidden the entire party. And around that, it's basically implying that you can go through this ballroom where people are partying, there's jesters, there's dancing, and this hide in shadows check can either be it just says evade the reveler's notice. So maybe that is going around the outskirts. Maybe that is blending in with the crowd and seeming like normal dancers. So
Yeah.
hide in shadows check can also just be more than shadows.
I think it becomes situational. So let's talk about that for a minute. If they're trying to go through a party, there's already a lot of noise going on. So they don't need to sneak silently. In that case, you would use the hide in shadows. If you're walking through a dungeon and it's dark and you're 10 feet in front of the torchlight scouting ahead, but it's silent, you can't hear anything, I would say you want to use sneak silently because you're already mostly hidden. So you can pick one or the other. If we look out at handout 2E, you wouldn't let a thief come up and, sneak and then do a backstab and read in languages. Those are all skills they would have to use. So page 36 says the action die for the thief. A thief uses their action die for any normal activity, including attacks and skill checks. Skill checks would be hide in shadows and sneak silently. So they would only get one action die until like 5th level. That means they would have to use that action die for one or the other. They couldn't do two of them. They just can't. Another thing to note is the lucky birth sign is 10, born under the loom, skill checks, including thief skills. So they can get a bonus to that if they have a high enough luck.
And that does actually even tie into in the description of the sneak attack backstab, is it says, that it's usually associated with sneak silently or hide in shadows. So it's like, again, it's one of those situational, which one is the thief choosing to use as their, and I think these are, broad, a little bit broader terms than you might think. And so, like, thief might be particularly good at hiding, and that's his focus of how he's trying to make this stuff happen. Another one is good at sneaking, so it does seem like it is a choice, one or the other.
And I think that's kind of where the confusion comes in, because as you just mentioned, and I showed the handout for it, I had it ready, it says backstabs are combined with. So that kind of gives people, oh, I can sneak and do a backstab. No. It is one action dice or the other. First you have to sneak up to him and then do the backstab.
I'll say it importantly there, it says backstabs are combined with checks to sneak silently or hide in shadows, not and. So another little point.
So I did find some other info, Stefan. If we look at the familiars for a second, if we look at page 318, table 7.5, and I highlighted some of them, these are just for kind of flavor in your game. If you have a white cat or a black cat familiar, you move very silently automatically. So then you could just concentrate on hide and shadows all the time because you're already moving silently. And conversely, it doesn't say this, but evil judges like myself, if they have a miniature minotaur figure or a giant cricket, they could be making noise when they're walking. So they have to concentrate on moving silently. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think that, to me, it seems like if a thief is in a situation where they would need to both sneak silently and hide in shadows, sneaking probably isn't what you're going to want to do in that situation, because it seems like it's going to be too difficult for them anyway. If you're trying to sneak directly in front of somebody completely silently, maybe choose a different path or think of a different plan of how you want to handle this situation, because the rules do seem to say it's kind of an either or. You're doing one or you're doing the other.
Raw definitely says you have to do one or the other. Now, for the judges out there, here is a handout for when not to make a skill check. And Joseph defines this very well. Page 67 says, skill checks are designed for use of a system of abstract rules as necessary to adjudicate a situation. Only make a skill check when practical descriptions by the players will not suffice. So in that case, if a thief is saying, I'm sneaking down this dark hallway and I'm putting, my heel first, heel toe, they're describing it. So I'd say roll either one, and I'm going to give you the benefit of both because you've described it really well. So it says, for example, imagine the character is exploring a room whose walls are covered in clay tablets. One conceals a hidden door. Instead of asking for the skill check, ask for that player's actions. So when they say, I sneak down the hallway, say, how are you sneaking down the hallway?
I also think if the thief just says they're sneaking down the hallway and you decide that, like, they describe it as they're trying to stay hidden and move silently, then maybe it can be up to the judge of which one is more likely to get them caught and do that one as their skill check.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, somebody's looking really closely but not listening, and they describe themselves as like keeping to cover in the shadows and trying to move silently, then roll the hide in shadows one because that's the one that's more likely to get them caught.
I
and
mean,
just sort of say, okay,
yeah, I mean, in most of our modules, if the big bad guy, the evil witch, is doing a ritual and all the little minions are staring at her, watching the ritual, they're listening to her chant, right? She's concentrating on the ritual, she's not looking. So you really don't need to focus on sneaking silently. You need to focus on staying hidden. And so, as long as they describe that well, I would give it to them. You agree with that, Stefan?
I do, and it also goes in the role play if they're hiding a bunch amongst or hiding amongst a bunch of cultists, and they kill a couple of cultists or they find some extra cultist robes. They don't really need to be like sneaking around anymore. They're doing it through their actions just as much as it would be if they're describing something else. So
All right.
it, I think we can kind of. I think
Well,
we're all once again in a consensus kind of.
before we get our final answers, this is one more point of contention where I think the rules get muddled a little bit. John, tell me what you think. On page 60 for stealth, halflings are quite good at sneaking around. They receive a bonus to sneaking silently and hiding in shadows, depending on their class level. They use this in the same manner as a thief's ability. So for the halflings, they don't have separate skills. They have a sneak and hide skill. It lets them combine them. So is the halfling getting over? What do you think, John?
Well, I think that almost ties into what Ben was saying about the situation, but that does really kind of complicate things because it's like, well, then I guess it would be like like you're saying, is the halfling better than the thief? I don't think that was probably the intent, because it's like then it's like if we're saying choose the one that you think best applies, but for the halfling, it's like then there wouldn't be that same kind of dichotomy. So I don't know. That is a complication.
What do you think, Steph?
It really is.
I think it's a design intent thing just to try to keep things simple. It does make me go, why didn't they just do that with the Thief 2? It's really not that big of a deal. But I think it is a design intent thing, and we might be looking at it a little just too closely.
How different are the bonuses
Uh,
between depending on the alignment of between, are they always the same, or is there substantial differences between hiding and sneak silently on that thief chart?
the
I don't have a.
halfling gets a +3 at first level. It goes +3, +5, +7. So the halfling starts out stacked with sneaking and hiding. But they, of course, don't have all the thief abilities. And then I'm pretty sure it depends on alignment. I think one of them's got like a +0 in hiding, and the other two have a +1.
Uh,
One has a +1,
it,
one has a +3.
I mean,
it
but do they mirror
depending
each
on the
other?
alignment, it's either at level 1 it's one is +3 and the other is +1, and just depending on the alignment. But if you look at like level 5 for a thief, it is either like +8 or +9 or a combination of the two for a thief. If you look at halflings, at we go up to level 5, they have a +9. So it's pretty similar all in all.
Well, let's give our final answers on this topic. When sneaking, does a thief have to make a move silently and hide in shadows check? My answer is no, they cannot make both. They have to choose one or the other depending on what outcome they want to have most. If they want to be hidden more or if they want to concentrate on being silent more. But the caveat I will say is if they describe that they're walking silently and doing a hide and shadows check, I would give it to them. Stefan, what's your final answer?
I'm with you all the way on that one. I will, with the one little extra pieces. If they say I'm gonna sneak through here, they're talking about sneaking silently, and it's a really loud party. That's not gonna get them anything really. They should have done a hide in shadows. Like some are just more appropriate to different situations, and sometimes there can be an incorrect answer.
All right, and John?
Yeah, I think I've been kind of convinced it's got to be one. So that no, then you can't do both, or it doesn't require.
All right, and Ben, what is your final answer on the topic?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with all of you and say no, they're going to choose one or the other depending on which one's most appropriate to the situation.
So yeah, judges out there, you have your answer. They have to make both, but when they say, I want to hide in the hallway, say, how are you going to hide? Make them describe it. When they say, I want to sneak into the room, say, how do you sneak in the room? Just give them a little question. Uh, let's burn on to question 3 real quick. When climbing sheer surfaces, how far can a thief travel before having to make another check? Stefan, I know you were interested in this question. What do you think?
Yeah. I think I was looking at modules for this one, trying to find different examples of how it was used, and my answer is they complete their task. If they are trying to scale a wall, the wall requires 1 check. If they are trying to climb out of a pit, it's 1 check. It's just if it is a 1,000-foot tall ziggurat and each of the steps is 100 feet tall, it's going to be more than 1 check because that is a monumental task. But generally speaking, it's just 1 check for whatever the task is. If it's a really big thing, just make the DC higher.
I would have to agree with you. If we look at Handout 3, page 66 says a skill check is made by rolling a dice. If the skill is untrained, the character makes a d20. Otherwise, they roll a d10. Then the appropriate modifiers are applied, and the total is compared to the difficulty challenge for the task at hand. If the roll is greater than or equal to DCC, the skill check succeeds, otherwise it fails. It's a yes/no situation. If they make that check, they are on the wall. They know the footholds, handholds. Now, they can only move 30 feet with their movement, or 60 feet if they double move. And if the wall is 100 feet high, they would have to move twice, but they wouldn't make another skill check because they've already succeeded at that skill check. Purple Sorcerer and Apprentice,
Well,
what do you guys think on the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think adding in any more skill checks is just going to slow things down and make climbing stuff inconvenient. If they're climbing a really, really long distance, then maybe it would make sense. Okay, add in a second skill check halfway through where they're losing their grip and need to like reaffirm it, or just increase the difficulty of the initial skill check because it's further. But it does seem that, yeah, skill check, you succeed, that's it. You've succeeded at the skill check.
That's a great point, increasing the DCC. Jon, what's your opinion on the matter?
I think the only thing that might complicate it is like if you're in combat, and then so say like the party's fighting at the top of a cliff, and the thief has to climb up. That's the only time where I would think, well, now suddenly how fast they can go makes a difference in terms of the actual combat. Now, of course, you could just simply say, yeah, it's 1 roll, but it's going to take you 2 turns to get up there. You don't have to roll each time. I mean, because like if you look inside, apes climb at 20. They move at 30, but they can climb at 20. So it's like, I'm guessing that you're not climbing at the speed that you walk. But again, this is one of those things. It's like that doesn't matter in most. Like you're all watching the thief climb up to the top of the idol to pull out the gem. It does. The time is probably not going to be a big issue. So the only time would be is like if you were in combat and you had to determine how fast are they going to be able to get up there to do that backstab or whatever, But in normal situations, just for sheer gameplay situations, it's like no, you're completing the task just like Stefan said.
And I think it's funny, the module that's in the back of the 8th printing is Idrisil's Maze. And it, as I was going through the book on page 457, it says the brambles can be climbed with a DC 10 strength or climb surfaces check, but the climber must also make a DC 10 reflex save for every 10 feet climbed. Falling the save inflicts 1d4 damage on the climber as she stabs herself on the sharp thorns. If the saving throw is failed with a 1, they fall and take falling damage. So I thought that was interesting that there was actually a case of re-rolling for checks, but it wasn't to see if they could climb it or not. It was to see if they got hurt and fell off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's another good. If it's a monumental climb, if you're climbing, Jack and the Giant Beanstalk type thing, maybe it's if they roll a 1, they're gonna just fall off. That's what happens.
Their arms
But
get
if
tired.
the DC is 20, yeah, if the DC is 20 and they only get a 10, maybe they take some stamina damage instead because they're just like the climb is just so rough on them.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a binary. You did it or you didn't. The failure can be more than a you didn't. It can be you did it at a cost.
I've got one.
And I think we've all made.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No. You go.
We've all made the mistake of like having where too many rolls in a row are required, and how that can just drag thing. I don't know if any of you played 4th edition, but they had like, what was the thing where you were doing the chases through the city and you do a bunch. Yeah, what was that called?
Skill challenges.
Yeah, skill challenges. And when I first read that, that's kind of a cool idea. That sounds interesting. And then you did it, and it was just like, incredibly boring. Really, really boring. And so it's just like, anything that can avoid like multiple rollings of the same thing is probably.
I think it was a good idea, but it wasn't implemented in the best way.
Yeah.
Stefan, I got one more handout here. If you want to read the quote from Harley Stroh, and I just thought of it now. If we got the Purple Sorcerer and the Purple Apprentice on here, and JG is the Dark Master, can we call Harley Stroh the Dark Apprentice?
Yeah, I think he could be, or he might be like, the Dark Skateboarder or something.
Yeah, the dark. I was thinking like the Dark Rollers.
So there was a little bit more text in between, but I cut out the relevant part for this quote from Harley. But I can't see it on my screen, Stefan. If you could read it for me.
I got it. Yeah, it's only make them roll when it counts. That is the bolded part. It says just basic judge advice, but I repeat it here to remind myself. Players have a finite attention span. As judges, their attention is our most precious resource. Spend it where it matters. Do we really need the thief to roll that climb wall check or the warrior to make that strength check to open the door? Well, yes. If the thief is climbing through an ice cave and about to fall through the chasm of doom, or if the warrior is being chased by an ogre, but otherwise, why risk an ignominious end, or at the very least, a waste of their attention when you could be getting to the real adventure? While the game isn't necessarily about heroes, the leveled PCs are definitely competent at their trades. Permit them to be so and add risk where it matters.
I think that's a great piece of advice right there. So, like they succeed once on the climb surfaces check, they can climb that wall up and down for as long as they get attacked or whatever, because otherwise it's going to be an unnecessary roll. They've already succeeded. Let them have it. So my answer for when climbing sheer surfaces, how far can a thief travel before having to make another check, is if they succeed, they do not have to make another check. Stefan, what's your answer?
Absolutely, except maybe in combat.
All right, Ben, what do you think?
Ben?
Yeah, same thing. They succeeded the skill check. They succeeded climbing the wall, except maybe in really specific circumstances, combat or some time where there's some reason, like in the adventure, the module included in the manual of they're climbing up thorns, and so you need to keep making skill checks because they're stabbing themselves. But in 9 out of 10 cases, one roll's going to do it.
John?
Yep, agreed. One roll.
All right.
Perfect. So that means we are on to our final question of the night. Can a thief backstab with any kind of weapon that they are trained in?
This is a tough one, but I worked it out. Can a thief backstab with any kind of weapon they are trained in? Yes, they can. But it has to be a trained weapon to use the backstab skill, I think.
I'm with you on that. I'm no arguments from me. John, what do you think?
I mean, well, we have like the specific language in the subnote there that says, yes, you get a bonus if you use like the bonus damage for the garrote or the blackjack, and so, but that leaves open that, of course, well, yes, but as long as you're trained in the other weapons, you can use them. They just don't have that benefit. Right. With obviously now, I don't know, what is is there restrictions on what thieves can be trained in?
There are,
because like
And so I popped up
Yeah,
the
'cause
handout that you were referring to. Certain weapons are particularly effective with backstab attempts and do additional damage. As noted in the equipment list, backstab attempts can be only made against creatures with clear anatomical vulnerabilities. But yeah, so the handout that you're referring to, I've got a nice little highlighted handout here. There's the weapons. Well, this isn't the handout you're referring to. So we got blackjack, blowgun, dagger, garrote, and you can see that it has an extra value for the damage. If you use it as non-backstab, it's the 1d4 for a dagger, but if you use it as backstab, it's a 1d10.
We skipped over Ben's initial opinion.
I agree with all of you. I mean, the wording seems pretty clear that, I mean, it doesn't specifically say you can backstab with other things, but by specifically listing that these weapons are especially good at it, seems to imply that the other weapons aren't as good at it, but can still be used. So if a thief is trained in a staff, they can try to backstab with a staff. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I can't imagine it's going to be that effective, but they can do it.
Well, one of the bonus weapons, for it is a blackjack, which, kind of just a really small staff.
plunking
you
them in
know,
the back of the head.
Yeah,
And-
it's same
and
thing as there. You hit him in the back of the head.
I found the handout, page 34 under weapon training. They are trained in blackjack, blowgun, crossbow, dagger, dart, garrote, longsword, short sword, sling, and staff. So all these thieves that I've been letting use longbows and short bows, that is about to change because I've now studied the rules.
Yep. So a backstab does not have to literally be a stab in either the melee context or the, pointed instrument context.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that in the description of the backstab, it's when you're attacking an opponent from behind or who is otherwise unaware, I believe the wording is. So it's almost more of a sneak attack of, yeah, you're not necessarily hitting them in the back. Maybe they're blinded and you're attacking them from the front or whatever. It's an attack from stealth. They're unaware of the attack coming. And it seems like, yeah, they could do that with a longsword or a staff. It's not going to be as effective as using a dagger or a garrote, which are sort of designed for that sort of situation.
And I see in the chat we got a Dice Station Zebra asking, how about backstabbing with a missile weapon? Absolutely. You have blowguns listed as one of those things that get a little bonus there.
Yeah.
Daggers can be thrown.
And only if it's crossbow, because they are not trained in longbows or short bows. They are trained in crossbows, however. So if they're from distance and they're hidden and the enemy
And
is
slings.
unaware of them and they make a backstab, I would let them use it with a crossbow.
Yeah, that
Seems to me like
crossbow
a
you get behind the
situation.
liver or whatever.
That seems to me like a situation where, when it describes hide in shadows as being used before a backstab attempt, a lot of the times you're not using hide in shadows to move, you're using it to hide in a specific spot. That might make sense for if you're using a blowgun, you hide in the shadows behind cover, and then in the next turn, you're then using a blowgun to try to backstab the opponent.
Well, and
Absolutely.
so
You're waiting for the king to arrive at the dinner party while you wait up in the rafters.
we do, to answer Zero's question, John, we do have some guidelines on using an untrained weapon. Table 4.1, it's got some significant little conditions there. Attacker is using an untrained weapon. They are -1 on the dice chain. So does that mean if a thief was using a longbow and they wanted to try to backstab with that longbow, but they're not trained in it, would they still be able to use the backstab bonus but have to roll down 1d? Because we have directives for that when they use an untrained weapon.
Does it say in the description of the backstab trained weapon?
Let's see here. Let's find the description of the backstab real quick.
So it's tickling something in my mind.
Got it. The most successful thieves killed. Certain weapons are particularly effective with backstab attempts to do additional damage. It doesn't say so, but I mean, a backstab. Thieves are only able to do a backstab because they have taken the time to train in such a thing. So I would say they do have to be using it with a trained weapon, because otherwise they're fumbling about a little bit.
I think John is convincing me now because it doesn't specifically say trained or untrained. I think I would make them roll down on the dice chain, but they've succeeded in being hidden, and they're skilled enough to know where the kidney is or where the back of the heart is on a body, that whatever their weapon they're using would be considered deadly in their hands.
And they are being punished by it going down the dice chain. So, they are getting a minus. And
Now, there are some cases where they would be able to use a bow or a mace or a hand axe, which they're not trained in, and not get a reduction value if it was their 0 level starting weapon. Because they are considered trained in their 0 level starting weapon. So, for example, if they were a mendicant, they would be trained in the club. If they're a shaman, they would be trained in the mace. A soldier would be trained in a spear, or a woodcutter would be trained in a hand axe. In that case, they would get to use those as their backstab dice attempt and consider it trained. Ben, what do you think about the whole trained and untrained thing?
Yeah, I agree that there doesn't seem to be anything that says that they can't do it with an untrained weapon, and it seems like using the untrained weapon has a built-in, they're being punished for using this untrained weapon. And so it seems like they can attempt to backstab. It's going to be harder because they're using something they're not familiar with, but it seems like they can. You might not recommend it. It doesn't seem like it's going to be especially effective, but they probably could.
Stefan?
I think you could. They can get their backstab bonus, but they won't be able to crit. They don't get the automatic backstab crit because they're using a D16 instead of a D20.
That's a good point. Because when they do succeed on a backstab attempt, they do get a crit. And if they're using an untrained weapon, they would be unable to crit on that weapon. That is an excellent point. That would be another penalty, and it makes sense. They're untrained in this weapon. They don't use it very often. They can backstab and get the bonus, but they can't get the crit. I love that. Well, we do have one more mention from JG himself, where he was talking about the updated Thief class. Stefan, do you have that handout prepared?
I do, and this is August 17th, almost exactly 11 years ago. So this is 2011. It's the beta days. He talked about thieves in general, but what the part pertaining to backstabs, what is select weapons do additional damage when employed in a backstab. He mentions that it's written down, and then goes on to say in between the hard DCs on sneak silently and hide in shadows, and the weapons being more appropriate for backstabs, I think the backstab will work a little better mechanically. Talks about his lineage and playing games and the thief taking out a bunch of guards and sentries with backstab attempts, and that's what he was going for.
So, to answer our final question, can a thief backstab with any kind of weapon they are trained in? My answer to that specific question is yes. Any weapon they are trained in can get the backstab and the crit, but certain weapons will get increased damage. To answer our secondary question, which John brought up, can they backstab with untrained weapons? Yes, but to Stefan's point, they would not be able to receive a crit, and I think that's the way to go. Stefan?
I'm right with you 100% on that. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It seems like they can use whatever weapon they want for backstabs. Some are going to be especially effective. Weapons that they're trained in that aren't effective will still work. Untrained weapons seems like not being able to get a crit, and obviously using the lower dice of using an untrained weapon is going to be sufficient punishment to probably dissuade most thieves from trying it. But the option's there if you really want it.
And John?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Stefan, I don't think we've had an episode ever where everyone on it has agreed with every question.
We got to get some more controversial questions again.
Yeah.
We got to start talking.
You're all fools, I tell you.
If you guys are interested in submitting questions to Raw, you can do so on the Dungeon Crawlers Discord. You can find that. There's an entire channel for it. I want to thank Jon and Ben Marr for being here. Thank you guys very much for coming on. Jon, what do you got coming up in the future? I know you just completed a successful fundraiser.
Yeah, so I do want to thank everyone who participated in the fundraiser. Again, it just completely blows my mind, and it's like, I'm doing this on the new iPad that we got, which is hugely important for me doing the development. But so I'm working on tools. Ben and I are working to get this first adventure of his completed, and because he's really excited about the second one. I'm sure he can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, so lots of stuff going on.
Outstanding.
And if you want to find out more, especially if you're new to DCC, we at purplesorcerer.com, we have a variety of tools, and they're all designed to make getting in and playing the game easier.
What is the 0 level creation count up to now, Jon? Do you know right offhand?
We are just about to go over 30 million.
Ooh, I need to start making some so I can have that 30 millionth character.
Yeah, we get a, you're the 30 millionth customer.
I've been trying to think about how to actually do that in a way that would not have people producing hundreds of characters just to do it. But it's probably during Gen Con, we are going to go over 30 million.
That's outstanding. I saw there's a petition starting online. Well, not really a petition, but 2 comments about moving the luck stat to the very bottom. And I'm gonna have to be the third one to sign that petition.
Yeah, it's like, and I saw that and I said, it's just like, modifying the printed character sheets is one of the more time, because it's basically all you can do is I'm just like 0.001, 0.002 moving things, to get them to all fit. So it's one thing I loathe. It's remarkably time consuming to do new character sheets, but I do understand why that would be a neat option, and I would like to do that. So we'll see.
All right, well, Ben,
you got to get the Purple Planet Mercurial magic on there so that for whenever that reprint happens, got to get ready.
It is coming. Ben, what do you got going on?
Yeah, so we obviously earlier this year had our Kickstarter for Dread Specters of the Shrieking Veil, which we're working on right now, hoping to get it out sometime not too long away. We've had a couple crazy months, but we're in the thick of it now, so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. And then probably later this year, we're planning the Kickstarter for my second adventure, which I'm really excited about. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to go back to Indonesia for a month on a study abroad, visit a whole bunch of spots, got a ton of new ideas for things to introduce in my adventures, and I'm really excited for the second one. It's going to be exploring a ruined temple in the depths of the jungle. It's going to be awesome. So I'm really looking forward to that. So
outstanding. Nice. Congratulations. Stefan, I think that's it for us. You got anything you want to say?
I got my delivery of all the stuff from my Kickstarter literally 10-15 minutes before the stream started. So I don't know, if you back that, you'll be getting your stuff real soon.
Put it up to the camera again so we get a close look at it. Yeah. Let me see that. Ooh, look at that pretty color cover. Nice.
That's a cool heavy metal feel.
Yeah, that's by the artist Bows and Awe. He does great work. He's doing some stuff in Dance TV's Bronx Beast, and I gave him a couple ideas and just told him really have fun with that cover. Make up what you want to do, and he made some awesome stuff.
Well, DCC viewing audience, that is it for us. We wish everyone at Gen Con a great time. That's where Elena and most of the Goodman Games cast is. Please travel safe, have a great time out there, and think about all of us back here in our little houses wishing we were at Gen Con. We will see you guys in 2 weeks on the 16th, when our guest is going to be returning guest, Bob Brinkman, to tackle these questions and give his opinion on what we've already discussed over the last few weeks. Thank you, everyone, and we will see y'all later.
Take care.